So, this one goes out to all the kind people that have been sending me really positive and encouraging notes and saying they're appreciating my little chats. It's pretty clear I'm not really being taken seriously for the directorship of the company, New York City Ballet, and that's to be expected. I haven't been around New York in a while. I have been staging Balanchine all over the world, but, out of sight, out of mind, as they say. And of course, the board would need someone with a higher profile for fundraising efforts. I understand all of these issues, and as I've said, so many times, my main concern, of course, is that the New York City Ballet continue the Balanchine repertory, as I think that's the whole reason it exists, and we'll see it through many a bad storm if the Balanchine repertory is done correctly, etc. And I will repeat again, I'm not criticizing the current dancers or staff. You're all doing the best you can. Balanchine's been gone 35 years. I understand all this. No one's to blame. Well, maybe somebody's to blame because he should have been bringing back right from the beginning dancers like Suzanne Farrell, Violette Verdi, Melissa Hayden when she was still alive, Jacques d'Amboise, certainly Eddie Villella, a number of us, to coach the ballets and the dancers, etc., in the Balanchine repertory. That's how it's traditionally passed on. But for whatever reason, insecurity, ego, this was decided not to be done by your last director. And here we are. But what I wanted to talk about here specifically, since I'm not making a pitch to be the director anymore, is about Balanchine and music. I take class still regularly, and I was speaking today to a few people about the way Balanchine used music. And what people don't understand is he was as much a composer, really, as he was a choreographer. He studied composition at the Imperial School. I think he wanted to be a pianist for a time. It's interesting, and I know all these things because of my relationship with him that maybe people don't know. But I've told you before that he brought me to LA as a choreographer. Brought me from LA as a choreographer when I was 19. I did workshops for a couple months. He took me in the company. He had me do my first ballet for the company when I was 20. And so I was kind of more intimately involved with him during the 8 ballets I did for the company because he oversaw them, including lighting. That's also a big issue I have. But what Balanchine did for all of the ballets, all of his ballets, including mine, and I think even Jacques d'Amboise, he would make the piano reductions himself. So what we used in rehearsal were Balanchine's own piano reductions of the full orchestral score. He did this as a hobby. He did this because he loved music. But it also meant that he also knew the music better than any of us. And that was a bit intimidating. But I was very happy he was like this. But Balanchine's relationship to the composers is interesting because he was a spiritualist, and he felt that he would see them again. And the death only gets us to the real world. I've told you before, Balanchine didn't consider this plane of existence, the real world. He felt the real world was elsewhere, and dance, music, art was a bit of a conduit and could kind of open those doors a bit. It was I thought that was the most beautiful thing he said. But Balanchine with the composers felt he had a big responsibility to them, to not screw it up, because he'd see them again. So he did the piano reductions himself so he could become intimately involved with the music. He always tried to follow the metronome markings on the score. People think Balanchine sped up ballet. That's not true. If you look at old films of the Kirov with Dudinskaya and Chabukiani, or even 1940s and 50 films of the Royal Ballet with Margot Fonteyn, you'll see that the tempos are all very fast, faster than Balanchine sometimes, actually. I posted a Nutcracker Pas with Fonteyn and Soames, and it's faster than Balanchine's Nutcracker Pas. It's more exciting that way anyway. It's really, really thrilling when the music is done correctly. And for Balanchine, you don't really have a Balanchine ballet unless the music is the right tempo, the lighting is correct, the decor is correct, the costumes are correct, because Balanchine was involved with all of those elements. It was never just the steps. So I just wanted to say about Balanchine and music that I hope whoever the new director is, it really takes that to heart. There are enough videotapes and enough recordings that Balanchine oversaw with our great musical director, Robert Irving, for many years. They did a lot of recordings, and the tempo is correct, and it's brisk, and the dancers just have to keep up. Sorry, but that's the truth. You have to keep up. And that all comes from class, which is another reason why I'm concerned, because without a really proper Balanchine class, and I'm not talking just about speed, really, I'm talking about the class. Suki Shore knows what I mean. Kay Mazo knows. Unfortunately, all the dancers that came in the last few years of his life don't know, because Balanchine's class has changed quite drastically for the last 3 or 4 years of his life, when he was ill and going through the brain problems. They weren't diagnosed till after he died, so nobody knew what was going on. But I knew something was drastic because I was not there every day, so when I would come back 2 or 3 times a year and spend a few weeks with him and take class, it really was a shock to me to see the changes in the class. I think everybody else just kind of got used to it because it was a gradual daily thing. But to me, it was night and day, and I asked him once, I said, why? And he said, I have no more time left, dear. I've said this in an earlier posting. I have no more time left, dear. He knew that his time was up, and that broke my heart. But it changed his classes. So the classes should be in another conversation, but I wanted to say about his musicality. He didn't just write, or didn't just choreograph to what he heard. He choreographed to what was on the written score. If there was a silent one, he would put in a step on that silent one. And what he did was, he basically composed a whole new melodic line. And very few choreographers can do this. They usually copycat what they hear, or they copycat the beat. He did a lot more than that. Of course, the rhythm, the beat was very important, but he also knew music so well that he recognized some jokes that the composers might put in. He recognized the modulations that we may miss unless you're a thorough musician, and he would reflect that in the choreography. And all these things make his ballets very rich. And the last thing I'll say is that even in his most abstract ballets, he wanted a dance element. It wasn't just steps. Even in ballets, and I've staged these, episodes, music by Webern, or, of course, any of the Stravinsky works, Egon, or Four Temperaments, or, monument movements, of course. And I've danced movements for piano in orchestra. The secret in dancing them or staging them is to remember they're dancing. It's dancing. He had this, of course, genius, overused word, but he was, that it was a dance, even though it may not look like it on first glance. But if you understand, and that takes some hands-on passing down, there's a dance in there. And even in Egon, which is based on the French dancing manual, if you approach it, and he took me in private rehearsals of Egon when I did the first pas de trois, the boy solo, and it opened up the world, because what he really was doing was choreographing a dance to this very 12-tone astringent music with very odd steps. But if you just put your dance glasses on and go, oh, it's a court dance. Oh, there's a lot of humor in it. A lot of wit. It keeps it from getting dry, and it keeps the Balanchine ballets from looking sterile, which they can look. They can look boring if they're done wrong. And Concerto Barocco, for instance, I was watching him rehearse Gelsey Kirkland a lot when she was first coming up in the company, and he kept saying more jazzy, Gelsey. Now the music is Bach, but there's a lot of counterpoint and a lot of 1-2 with the accent and the step on the 2. So if you do it that way, all of a sudden it becomes jazzy. And to finish with a little joke, I was staging it for the Paris Opera, and Suzanne Farrell was there staging Zagan. And there was a press conference, and we had to speak to the press, and I gave that anecdote about Balanchine wanted Concerto Barocco, which is very pure classical ballet, but he wanted it to have a kind of a jazz, syncopated, cool element to it. The first and third movement, mostly, not the adagio, but the first and third movement get very, very, snap your fingers to it. You can really get down on it. But I said this, that he wanted it jazzy. And Suzanne Farrell spoke up in her best ballerina diva voice, and she said, well, John, he never told that to me. He never said for me to make it that way. And everybody kind of held their breath. And I said, well, Susie, he didn't need to tell you. You always made everything look jazzy. And she laughed and goes, well, I guess that's true. And so it depended on the specific dancer. Gelsey needed loosening up. Suzanne Farrell never needed loosening up. End of today's little talk. I hope the people that are enjoying this enjoy this one. As for my love of the New York City Ballet, it's not waned. For my love and respect of the school, it's not waned. I'm sorry I'm not, being put in a position to help more. That's their choice. But I do wish them well. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll just keep doing my bit to keep what I can alive. Signing off. Bye-bye.